I need some traction. You need some traction.
My name is Jeff Christie. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Boast.ai, where we help over 400 companies automate, shred, and their R&D tax incentive claims. So welcome to the Scaling Your Back-to-Market Strategies. Today we got two amazing sales leaders, Jake Dunlap, the CEO of Skaled, and Whitney Sales, the managing partner at Acceleprise Ventures and the creator of the sales method. So a little bit about Traction. Traction was started by Boast.ai and Launch Academy in 2014 to provide actionable advice to help businesses drive growth. And I'll hand it over to Jake, who's going to bring us through our first presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm looking forward to this. I met Lloyd. I spoke at the Traction conference. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, Lloyd, maybe something like that. And he introduced me as the godfather of sales prior. And so there's a video on YouTube where he edited out himself referring to me as that. And so this video that they posted, it just says, it's me referring. I'm like the godfather of sales, like I'm referring to myself. So Lloyd, I feel like there needed to be like a reference to that at some point because it's great. It's like literally like the longest standing YouTube video. So what's up, everyone? Do me a favor as you join, drop your company name and your role into the chat. The more that you let me know, kind of, again, do we have founders? Do we have, frontline reps, et cetera? So again, all right, so you've got founders, AEs, so just start to drop that in there. It's just gonna help me to make this even more specific to everybody and make sure that you all get, what you want out of it as well. So as Jeff said, I'm gonna talk about back to market. So look, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've given this talk a couple of different variations now. Over the last, I would say probably 60 days, I have talked to at least 200 plus CEOs, VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, what's happening in their business, how are things working for them, how are they not working? And so what I'm going to try to summarize for you is as we think about the things that were not working before, we think about what's happening with buyer behavior today. How do we need to think about changing the old playbook, the old predictable revenue playbook, the old scale with a bunch of people and fire a bunch of people playbook to fit a more modern buyer and more modern times? So I'm going to just walk you through this. Again, I'm going to I'll monitor the Q&A. It's much easier for me. So again, if you go ahead and drop the questions in the Q&A, as Jeff said, it just makes life easier. Okay, good. So we've got a lot of founders, CEOs, some sales directors. Okay, good. We've got a good mix of folks here. So this is going to be very, very applicable to everybody as we go through this. So a little bit about me. I run a sales consulting and strategy organization. Really what that means is we partner with executive leadership to help to solve challenges within their marketing and sales organization. So usually my firm is coming in, we're working with companies around optimizing or overhauling their demand generation and lead gen strategy, overhauling their sales process, implementing new methodologies, fixing their account growth process, or more sales operations related work. We have certified sales force admins on the team. And so, because for me, as we think about solving sales challenges, and I'll talk about this, it's people, process, and technology. And that's kind of this like holy triad. And especially as we go back to market, I'm going to talk about why that's so important. So I already told you about Skaled, right? I'll pitch it later. So what did COVID expose, right? And for those of you who have built and scaled multiple organizations, you're going to, this is going to sound very, very familiar to you. If you haven't, that's fine too. But really what COVID exposed from my vantage point and from the conversations I've had over the last 60 and then even going back to March, was really that we, at some point, we decided to start to treat everybody like a buyer. That if you look at consistently the outbound processes that people are executing, the outbound processes, it has been this one size fits all. Everybody is ready to buy. And we are now hitting them up completely. We're not stopping. We're just obliterating these people with emails and calls. And in reality, so basically when COVID hit, we didn't know what to do. So everyone retreated into this turtle shell of like, oh my gosh, I hope you're doing well in uncertain times, et cetera. The issue as we kind of come back to market, and I'm going to talk about two real core themes. I just want to call this out because I think it's important, is that your buyers have always been in three buckets. And I do want to say this as well, guys, there's a lot of industries that are doing really, really well. A lot. Okay. Go look at the stock market. Okay. Unless the stock market tanked today and I don't know about it, right? There are a lot of industries that are doing extremely well. Those are the people you should be doing direct calls to action to. There's a whole group of people on the other side that are industries that were decimated and they're not doing so well. Hospitality, tourism, et cetera. So, and then we have the middle, which is like, they're in industries that are doing okay, and based on their business, they could be in this bucket or that bucket. And I think as we go back to market, and I'm going to talk about kind of modern demand gen, Daniel says the stock market is fake. Well, look, I'm telling you, there are businesses that are doing extremely well and they're buying stuff now. That's all I know, right? So as we go back to market, we've got to try to not go back with this one size fits all approach. This, by the way, my friends, has always been how it's been. There are industries that were in different areas of this. There are industries that were not doing so well in 2019. There are industries that were doing okay and industries that were doing well. And so the sophistication that we need to go back to market with has just changed foundationally. And so I think as we walk through this, I'm going to try to talk to you about what that means and how we have to meet buyers in this kind of new world. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is your outbound strategy. Okay. I'm going to assume a lot of you or all of you are B2B. And I'm assuming that, right? This is pre-COVID, right? So the amount of business emails sent every day, 128 million. I think it's probably got to be like, I don't even know, man. It's probably got to be even like 160 million now every day. So this channel, has just been pummeled. And the reason we love this channel so much, we love it, is because we can track it. We can track emails sent, etc. The issue is the volume. It worked. Again, what happened is we went through the cold call era, right? And that worked really well. Then we found email. We started to integrate it. And then email is easier than cold calling. So we switched to that. Now everybody is doing more email than anything else. So guess what? The channel's getting smoked, right? And when you look at, kind of our modern landscape, I think the most important thing I want you to pull out is that our modern landscape has completely changed, but yet we're still building our outbound engines the same way we did before. We have new buyers. Millennials are involved in 70% of decisions made in organizations. They might not be the decision maker, but they're involved, right? Millennials aren't trying to hear gated content, newsletter, drip campaign, right? Like, again, like when I talk to organizations and we talk to the sales organization in particular about how qualified your ebook downloads are. Guys, that was a play HubSpot in 2010. And we're still running it like the buyers are the same, right? Millennial buyers are looking for faster access to information. They want to interact with you differently. And then you've got modern technology, right? You've got technology that we have over 1,300 sales technologies right now, 1,300. And so if your sales tech is Salesforce and like two other things, it is a major competitive advantage when companies are using 5, 6, 7, 8 different sales technology stacks, spending $500-$600 per month per rep, right? And I'm happy I can answer some questions about key tech stack. But the most important change to me out of all three of these, technology is probably a close number 2, is new mediums and particularly LinkedIn. LinkedIn presents a new channel and a new opportunity that we have never had before. Nothing that has popped up like this in the last, 15 to 20 years. Email, candidly, was the most revolutionary idea before LinkedIn. The problem is what we started to do is apply a lot of our outbound principles to LinkedIn, and that's not really how social networks, work as a part of this. And so with our organizations, and again, step 1 is validate. If your clients are on LinkedIn, fantastic. If they're not, but don't just assume they're not. Right? Validate this, okay? Because I'm telling you, the amount of people, LinkedIn right now, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, it was the 16th most visited website in North America, right? It is a top 20 visited website in North America, right? And so the key though is that how you interact on LinkedIn. And we did a massive webinar yesterday about this where we had some reps. There's reps that, we've worked with that are generating 20 plus VP level meetings a month purely from LinkedIn. But the key is it's not about DMing people. And so as we go back to market, it's about adding more and more relevant buyers. And I want you to think about it like this. Let's say you have a sales team of 5, 10, candidly, it could be 1, it could be 100. That person can connect with up to, technically they can go more. Let's call it 80 to 100 people a day that are all your target buyers. That person can then produce content, text-only content or video content that is relevant to their buyers and engage with buyers in the comments. They can engage on their own, on the buyers' comments. They can engage themselves. This play is more complex. And the issue is the reason that we're not rushing to it is you can't track it. And so what we're seeing is that the SDR teams and sales organizations that are embracing, like, look, it's okay. And we're going to move, like, we're trying to move every single one of our clients to stop tracking calls and emails immediately and move to first outcome, which is like meaningful conversation. You know, they agreed to set up a meeting, we're working on time, or they connected me with the right person. There's other ways to define it, but you get the drift, because we're doing so much activity that can't be tracked, and that's okay. We shouldn't be forcing reps to do calls and emails because we can track it when we know deep down that our reps should be spending more time on LinkedIn. Again, our recommendation, again, this is an amazing link. And Becca, I don't know if you've joined yet, but you should drop the link for these guys. It's these reps literally that are just on LinkedIn all day long, but they're working. That doesn't mean they're being lazy. Doesn't mean they're just like, you know, hanging out. Like, they're working. They're in there commenting on this person's post, commenting. They're building capital. It's the same play that whenever you were the king of Vancouver in insurance and you went to this networking event and this networking event, LinkedIn is now a networking event where by posting, you get a 2-minute speaking spot every day. And the organizations that are embracing that and empowering their sales organization, right, to not just reshare company BS that never gets any likes or traction anyway, are the companies that are winning. And so when you think about go to market, it's not calls and emails here and LinkedIn over here, it's and. That you should be leading with, for a lot of you, especially if you're in B2B, you need to be leading with LinkedIn. LinkedIn needs to be the way you start the interaction, because if they're active, the opportunity to build relationship capital is unparalleled. Okay. So again, if you guys have questions, feel free, drop them in the comments. Again, just some like quick math, right? Quick math, right? The amount of people that you could be connecting with every day. Like, why wouldn't you want all of your salespeople to be connected with every single one of their buyers in their territory? Why wouldn't you empower your sales org to share industry relevant content to those individuals? That's it. That's the play. And comment. There's a whole bunch of things about Sales Navigator that I can get into, but we don't have time for it today. Okay, because here's the thing. Again, 90% of buyers say they want content that's relevant. They want a salesperson that gets their space, and they rank LinkedIn as the #1 choice for professional relevant content. They're begging for your sales team to produce, to interact. They want a salesperson who is a thought leader. Now, marketing can help to enable that, but not by just telling them to reshare one-sheeters. That's not how this shit works. Okay, that's not why individuals are interacting. Nobody's interacting. That's why nobody on a company, that's why your company posts don't get any interaction either. Because it's all about you, as opposed to value. Give, then ask. That is social media. And so again, we have to retrain the way we even think about outbound to have this kind of weird mix now of outbound, inbound. And again, the results are very, very, very real. Becca just dropped the link, and I highly recommend, if you want to go deeper on LinkedIn, seriously, do you don't even need to ask me any questions? Just go watch that. Because we talked to top reps. You know, there's one rep on there. He's generating 8 meetings a month from LinkedIn with VPs of companies over 200 million in revenue every month. There's another rep who literally is getting in trouble 24/7 because he's getting so much inbound lead in other people's territories that his managers have had to talk to him about it. Like, the opportunity to post and produce content and engage buyers is unparalleled. So I don't want you all to miss out on this, because you keep running the exact same play. Okay. I think this number is like 680 now. Like, very few people are posting. It's just it's a gold mine. Okay. Point number 1 is that rethink outbound. Do not go back to calls and emails, because you can track it. #1 piece of advice. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Mike says he watched the video again. That's amazing. how to know you are connecting with a real person on LinkedIn. Susan, can you clarify? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Don't send it a connection request. I can get into that later. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how we build organizations. Okay. And again, this is just a gut check for all of my sales leaders out there, my marketing leaders and founders and CEOs. There's a lot of sales leaders out there. There's a lot of CEOs I see in the chat, which is fantastic. Okay. I want us to think about marketing. We run marketing like a performance organization, right? And it seems ironic. You're like, Jake, of course sales is a performance organization. It's not. And let me tell you why. Marketing, for every dollar they spend, they are optimizing the shit out of it. For every dollar marketing spends, they're looking at cost per lead, cost per acquisition, cost per qualified opportunity. And not only that, they're optimizing it in real time. They're looking at data and inputs, and then they're optimizing it. In sales, that is not the attitude. We have around our demand gen funnel in sales, we're looking at our sequences or cadences every like 2 months. Our sales process, right? We're looking at it is a joke how infrequently sales organizations look at their sales cycle. So my sales cycle is 75 days. Like, okay, well, how can you fix that? You need to know your average age and stage at each step. And then you should be optimizing that every 2 weeks, right? And so we have to change, like in sales, we have been moving very, very slow and very, very sloppily for a long time. And I'm telling you, with the way that buyer behavior is shifting and it's moving faster and faster, we have got to build more agile sales organizations. And so as a part of that, I want to start with sales and rev ops. That most of you, your sales operations teams are glorified, they're stretched too thin, and they're glorified report builders, okay? And then maybe they do some like implementation stuff half-assed, and then you get like 60% adoption. So I want you to think the modern organization, you should be bringing in outside experts the same way marketing does. I want you to think about how marketing builds and scales a performance engine. They bring in a performance agency, a PR agency, an event agency, a digital agency, a web agency. Why? Because they're experts. In sales, we bring in one sales ops person or 2 or 3 or 4, it doesn't matter, who's not an expert in any of these technologies except Salesforce. They're not an expert in any of these pieces. So how are they going to optimize this for you, right? We have to think that, like, look, sales, we can't continue to think that we're some special flower that we shouldn't be using experts, right? And you have to think about bringing in the expertise to optimize in real time, especially from an outbound and from a sales process standpoint. You need to be looking at your sales process every week. Like literally, I want you to picture 2 sales organizations. They have. Again, I'll make them small. They have 10 salespeople. Similar market. This company is looking at their sales process, their sales methodology every 2, 4, 6 weeks. This one builds it all out. They do this big hoopla and then looks at it like most else, 6 to 12 months. Guys, it's rhetorical. You already know who's going to win. So again, it's insane to me how little time we actually dedicate to optimizing. Another analogy I'll give you to make this stupid simple, especially on lead generation and outbound. You're going to go spend, I'm going to say $30,000 a month in paid ad. That might be a lot for you. You can use whatever the hell math you want to use. Let's call it 20,000. Okay. Or I've got 4 full-time people. To optimize this 20,000, you're going to go and invest 5 or 10. To optimize this 20,000, you spend a big 0. It's the same thing. Both are trying to generate qualified opportunities. And so you have to start to think of this and this as the exact same thing. And obviously you can see how big that scales. If you're doing 100,000 and you've got 12 SDRs and no one is focused, their full-time job is optimizing sales performance for outbound, what are you doing, right? And so I want us to think about this, that as we go back to market, sales is no longer going to be this set it and forget it BS. It's going to be a performance organization, okay? Same thing goes for my friends in enablement. Okay, you're like, what is enablement? Well, Jake, that is content, okay? Right now, if you ask sales organizations how they deal with content, right, and what buyers need, they need something that's relevant to them. So no longer can we get away with producing this hero asset, the hero asset. Guys, the whole concept of a hero asset is 12 years old. But that's still how we're running most of our marketing plays. And most of like what we're calling MQLs plays. My friends, that's not one, it's not an MQL. We can get into that at some other time, right? But the key is it's not about the hero play as big. You need to then be creating 8 different micro variations based on industry or job title. And I'm telling you, again, this all might sound like, Jake, this sounds like a lot. There are companies that are executing this that are extremely small. They have part-time content writers. They say, hey, here's an ebook. Here, we just need you to now adjust this to finance. Here's where you do that. And then they're turning around, they turn that one piece of content into 15 relevant pieces of content with an extra 12 hours worth of work. They spent 50 hours to build the thing. Why not spend 12 to make it relevant? Companies are going to have to start to produce more content. Sales organizations, marketing organizations, companies are going to have to produce more and more and more relevant, specialized content. You're not going to be able to get away with the generic stuff, right? It's not going to happen for you. I'm sorry. And so this is my 2 big points that I want to get across. One, as you go back to market with outbound, we have to think about a different strategy. It's not calls and emails here and LinkedIn here. And by the way, I don't care if it's LinkedIn or not. I really don't care. Maybe your buyers are on Instagram, maybe they're on Twitter, maybe they're on TikTok. Wherever that is, and calls and emails needs to be the strategy. If it is LinkedIn, you need to be empowering your sales organization to produce content and interact and not shackle them with calls and email metrics that actually aren't going to lead to better opportunities than if they did it this way. 1. 2, you have to rebuild your sales organization as a performance organization, right? And again, I want you to think about this. Are you going to do it with more full times, which hasn't worked? It hasn't worked. Or are you going to bring in experts that can augment, an expert content writing company to help to augment this part of it, an expert sales operations consulting company, a sales process, whatever that might be. And you can do this internally too, but you got to hire experts. Doesn't matter, work with an expert or not, right? Or hire an expert to set up this system. But we've got to change the way that we think about, and especially for my man in here who's like in the venture capital world, this is the VC mindset. The VC mindset is this: you cannot hire sales external people because they won't care. But yet all other parts of the org are able to do it except sales. This is a VC perpetrated mindset in our little bubble here. And I'm telling you, it's completely false. That the best of the best companies bring in experts in the sales org to continue to optimize. And so again, as you guys are thinking about go to market, think about those 2 things. Am I going to go back to market with my same old outbound playbook, or am I going to catch up to where buyers are? And 2, am I going to rebuild with a performance organization from a operation standpoint and a content standpoint? So that's my time.
Sure.
Sure.
There's one question, just your thoughts on whether you can have a combined sales rep doing inside and outside type sales, or should you have dedicated reps for each function?
Look, you're seeing more and more deals. I mean, people are easily closing 6-figure deals via Zoom. And now because of what's happened, if you were that dude who got by, now you can live wherever you want, which is fine. If you were that person who got by because I go and meet my people in person, it's over for you. It's over. I'm sorry. Like the field, they're still going to be applicable in very certain industries and at a very certain ticket size. But what that is continuing to be consumed by inside sales. And Zoom has accelerated it, because then Susie, who is 65 in procurement and had never used Zoom before, and she's like, I want to meet you. Like, now Susie's totally comfortable with Zoom. And so what's happened is all of these decision makers that weren't used to doing business virtually are now experts at virtual. Therefore, salespeople can engage with them virtually more than ever. So that's that. Inbound, no, you should never have inbound and outbound reps, assuming you're doing any amount of volume in inbound. And the reason that you don't want to do that is if you start to feed, well, one, I think as many companies as possible should try to never do outbound, or only do outbound for the top, if you're like in an Uber enterprise. But if you are in SMB or lower mid-market, your whole goal should be to never do outbound. You should build a marketing and content engine. That's my number one advice. But assuming, Brian, that you have enough leads, like let's say you're averaging like 100 leads a month or something, like whatever, you don't want to mix the two, for the simple fact that if you start giving outbound reps enough inbound, they stop doing outbound because outbound's harder. So the key is how you and if you do want to do that, you just have to throttle it, and you have to create goals that are in line with that. So
my name is Whitney Sales. I am, as Jeff mentioned, I'm a managing partner at Acceleprise Ventures. We're a B2B SaaS accelerator and seed fund. Before Acceleprise, I actually worked in early stage sales and building out early stage sales teams. So when an organization was founder-led sales, usually pre-Series A, I was usually one of the first hires who would come in, start building out the process, and then start scaling out the team, and then turn it over to someone else to scale it up, similar to what Jake does. So my background, I've had 4 companies on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list, either as an early sales rep or as a sales leader within the organization, scaling up the team. Been through 4 acquisitions, 1 IPO. One of the last companies that I led sales at, which was formerly Talent IQ, now People Data Labs, was $1 million in ARR in 8 months. So rapid growth sales cycles at a very early stage is my specialty. And so what we're going to go over today is a little bit around how I like to structure qualifying calls. This process, if you guys are familiar with Chris Jan's 0.9 model of the different types of sales, there's mouse all the way up to, I think it's whale now. But this kind of fits into the brontosaurus, whale, I think it's bear category. So more of an enterprise sell. Though a lot of these tactics, even if you're in the SMB, partnerships become a really key component of your SMB sell. So these can be used for that in developing your partnerships. At the early stage, if there's one thing I want you guys to take away from this talk, is you're really trying to establish trust as an early stage company when you don't have a brand or people don't know you. And so how do you go about doing that as a founder or a salesperson within an early organization? And the other thing I'm going to mention in this is I will share this deck with anyone who wants it afterwards. And I actually have worksheets on this as well if you have a sales team. So just message me on LinkedIn and I'll actually just hand it on over. I share this with everyone. So it's not, you guys don't need to take screenshots or anything like that. It always happens when, when I'm giving a talk. So this is generally how I like to structure a qualifying call. So this would be after Jake's process, you get in touch with a buyer and you're trying to identify if they're your champion or not within the organization. So the person who's going to help you navigate the buying process within the organization. And you're trying to basically build them as a champion. How do you actually go about structuring that conversation to uncover the needs within the organization in kind of an educational way to get to a stakeholder meeting, which would be your group of buyers that you're going to be aligning around how they're going to be judging success of the product and the buying process overall. So I like to keep an hour for qualifying calls. Sometimes I'll only give you a half an hour, but generally this is how I like to structure it. I have kind of breakdowns here. This is for someone who's learning how to sell. So I have Banta at the end. If you're a more mature sales organization, you may be peppering Banta throughout your sales conversation, or you may use Champ. There's a lot of different processes you can use. I'm a little old school in the training because it's easier to remember Banta. So just to mention that. So I like to start with a laugh if I can. My last name's actually a great way to get people to laugh because it's pretty cheesy. I also learned early in my career that if someone asked about my last name being Sales, they were 90% likely to buy. So it was one of the first buying signals I actually got from a person when I was talking to them. So they were in a buyer's mindset. It was awesome. But there's a lot of different ways you can get someone to laugh. You can make fun of yourself in a positive way. I talk very quickly, so I'll say something around, I've had too much coffee today. Things like that. If you have a mutual connection and you have a fun story about that doesn't humiliate the person, that's great. Anything you can to basically humanize yourself. So name, titles, responsibilities. I like to break down responsibilities because understanding what someone's role within the organization is critically important. Because the titles don't necessarily map to responsibilities these days. Chief Innovation Officer can mean internal innovation, or it can mean buying new products within an organization. So it's really important to actually break that down. The other thing is confirming how much time you have. If someone extends the time that they have with you, that's actually a really good buying signal. So asking about that. The other thing that's kind of a tip in this is if you have multiple people involved in the conversation, actually writing down who's asking questions throughout the organization or throughout the conversation can break down and help you understand the buying process within that company, because you may have a senior person driving all the questions and you may have a junior person driving all the questions, and that's going to help you understand how that organization specifically makes decisions. and how that buying process is going to look. You may have to do a consensus-based buy versus a top-down sell. Agenda. So I use a little bit of Sandler method in this. So get a good understanding of how they currently do X. So this is going to set you up to actually ask questions of the buyer. A lot of the times we like to pepper with questions if we didn't tee it up and get permission from the buyer to ask the questions. They'll just say, actually, I just want to learn about your product. If you set up to ask questions ahead of time, you've built in permission to ask them questions. So it's a really important way to actually build that rapport and get that permission ahead of time. Discuss how you can help them with X. And then from there, outline next steps if there's a fit. And then I also like to tell them how to engage with me if they're going to be asking questions. Some people will sit back and think it's just a pitch. Depending on their culture, they may not necessarily be as comfortable asking questions. So telling them and giving them permission on how to engage can be really important. It can be during the meeting, I want you to interrupt me. Though I love to hear the sound of my own voice, I actually love your questions as well. So please feel free to interrupt me. And there's a little script down here at the bottom you can use. And then finally, asking them if there's anything that they want to discuss. If they've done their research ahead of time, they'll probably have topics that they want to discuss. And again, that's a really good buying signal. So it's going to tee you up really well. So from here, I like to jump into my founding story. So my founding story is my way to actually, and again, this is for early stage. So it's a way to establish credibility and knowledge in the space and establish yourself as a thought leader, and as well as empathize with the buyer you're talking to. So before you start, ask what they know. Again, if they've done their research, they probably know a little bit about your organization. If they haven't, totally fine. But it's going to be a good buying signal, and it's good to know, and you don't want to repeat things that they already know anyway. I like to start with, so I'll give People Data Labs as an example. So Sean was working with People Data Labs as an API for people that plugs into the back end of ATS's CRMs, marketing automation systems, ad tech, and standardizes the data around people. And they have the best employment history data there is out there. And so when they were selling the product, they were originally selling into HR teams, into augmenting their HR data. And his background, he started a company, was looking to hire a mobile developer, and he went and worked with a recruiter who was a friend of his. When he was working with the recruiter, he sat down with her, gave her the spec of what he's looking for. She said she'd get back to him quickly. And he thought, end of day, being a founder, you guys move really quickly. In reality, she didn't get back to him till the end of the week, and he had already hired someone for the role. And so he sat down with her, tried to get a better understanding of what she was, her process. She had 50 tabs across her screen, realized that most of the data in applicant tracking systems was not up to date. Most of the data in any people tool is not up to date, and realized this is a bigger problem in the market. 90% of data today has been produced in the last 2 years. And so, and the systems that were designed to keep track of this data on average are 10 years old. And so realized there was a huge gap between the tools and the data. And so he built People Data Labs to augment and update this data and keep it up to date on a consistent basis. And so that's his founding story that he leads into to actually frame the problem. And that then actually frames the buyer's mindset around the problem, that this is a problem. Cool. From here, I jump into qualifying questions. So I call them value-based questions. So what you're trying to do in your qualifying questions versus your sales questions is you're trying to identify, are they a good customer for you? So the components of whether someone's a good customer for you are, do they have the pain you're solving for? And as Jake mentioned, there's different levels of pain for different people within the organization. Ideally, your product can solve the problem based on the level they're at. So if you're selling at the C-suite, it's going to be more strategic than if you're selling at a junior level, which is going to be more tactical. And so you need to frame your questions around the type of person you're talking to, which you found out their responsibilities ahead of time, and then understand if they actually have that pain point. Do they have money to spend on this problem? And then is there a qualifying event within the organization that's actually driving a decision around this? So you really need to flush out, are they a good customer for you? If it's technical integrations that you need, asking those questions can be really important if you can't discover it using a tool like Built With or Craft or something like that. And then the second thing I'm looking for is, if they are a good customer for me, I want to identify a relevant case study that I can tell them that will relate to them, to show that I can do what I said I can do. And when I'm responding to these questions, what I'm doing is actually validating their responses using the statistical information that I know around the particular market. So yeah, that's actually something we hear a lot. Or yeah, we actually talked to another customer around this. Or did you know that 90% or 70% of companies actually have a similar problem to you? So you're starting to validate this and empathize with the buyer to show them that this is actually a real problem and it's something you see a lot. The other thing that in these responses, talking about another company in the industry or even one of their competitors that you talk to can help build credibility for you when you're talking about the problem that you're solving for, and that this is actually a problem with other people. And again, that you can say you can do because you're trying to establish that trust. From here, I jump into a case study. So instead of giving a demo of my product and showing features, benefits, what I actually am doing is talking them through a relevant case study for a customer like them and the benefits they got from the product, because that's fact versus opinion. And again, this is going to show you're trying to prove that you can do what you say you can do. And so this case study will actually help build that credibility as you're working through the sales process. And then it's a matter of, do they agree that this is actually a problem with their organization that's costing them a lot? And then if you're an early company that doesn't have case studies yet, that maybe haven't been fleshed out around an ROI, for example, and I have a script for this as well if you want it. What you can do is information that you discovered with your beta customers or in customer discovery. Cool. Now, from here, I jump into my sales questions. You're usually, from the buyer, if they buy in on the value proposition, you're going to get two types of questions. You're going to get process-oriented questions, which are going to be a buying signal around how do I implement this? What does the time take? Who needs to be involved? What data do I need? How long? Or you're going to get value-oriented questions. In that case, you're going to want to go back and requalify, write down all these value-oriented questions and understand the responsibilities of the person who is giving you these value-oriented questions. Because as Jake said, content's really important. And what those are knowledge gaps within the industry that you can target from your content to then send to these people afterwards to show, yeah, we actually know a lot about the space. Here's a piece of content around it. And it starts to help you craft your content stories. And your content strategy, around this. So when I'm going through my sales questions from here, so they may start asking questions around process or value. If they're asking process-oriented questions, what I want to do is now craft an ROI story for this buyer. So what do I need to know about how they're currently doing things that's going to help me craft an ROI? So I like to structure these questions as well as my qualifying questions and talk me through. Can you help me understand? Can you walk me through what this process looks like? What you're trying to do in your sales questions is put yourself in the shoes of the buyer, empathize with the buyer, and understand what does it look like to actually solve this problem today, so you can understand the day-to-day time, pain points, people that are involved, and how long. So it's going to help you craft that overarching value story that they can then go and take back to someone else to get the other stakeholders involved. And when they're when I'm responding to these questions, what I'm doing is empathizing. So yeah, tell me more. Can you talk to me a little bit about, the process of doing this? Wow, that must take a lot of time. And that's going to help flesh out more answers and more color. Also with that, it also makes the pain greater psychologically. The more color and detail you get from a buyer, the more painful the problem is and the more urgent it becomes. The other thing to mention in here is that your value-based responses are not a pitch. So a lot of people will be talking about the benefits or like, this actually is, it will help you with this. That's not what you want to be doing. You want to be getting information. And then from there, once you've collected all the information, what you want to do is give their specific use case that they can then take back to their team to engage other people within the organization, because there's 40% more buyers involved today than there were a few years ago. And ideally, they're educated buyers. They've done some research in the space ahead of time. So in the use case, what you're trying to do is, what do you need to know to craft that ROI story so they can then come back and take that story to them? So it might be, so what I'm hearing from you is that it typically takes 4 people involved in this process. These 2 people are working on it for 10 hours a day on average. And then to get the whole report together, let's say you're doing something that's a reporting tool, it typically takes you 2 weeks on average to get that together a month, plus, you know, some odd 40 to 60 hours across 4 people's time. Is that right? And so, okay, great. What I'm hearing from you is that, okay, then what I would say is we can cut that down to probably an hour to 2 hours through the integrations we're going to pull in this data. And so that report is going to be automated for you now, and you can pull it whenever you want. Just an example. You want to be clear and concise when you're giving this, and this is where you're going to get more questions. And this is where you're going to go, you're going to get those value-oriented questions or the process-oriented questions. And you want to be specific. From here, again, I mentioned you can pepper Banta in earlier, but again, I'm doing a lot of training for people who are inexperienced selling. So Banta stands for Budget Authority Needs Timeline. It's an old school way of qualifying a buyer on whether they can buy. There's a lot of content out there on this. You can also use Champ. Again, there's a ton of different processes that can be used, but this is basically to help you map the buying process within the organization. Budget, some of the questions I like to ask: how do you typically evaluate tools like this? Is this something that you have resources allocated for, or is this something you've looked at before? So are they trying to solve this problem today, or is this more of an educational conversation, in which case you may have to run 2 sales cycles with them? So you're educating them about a problem that exists, and then they need to see the problem within their organization, experience it, and then they'll come back to the table, which a lot of startups do have to run 2 sales cycles because they're educating the market about a new problem that they weren't aware of beforehand. Authority. Notice I'm not asking, are you the decision maker? Instead, I like to ask, is there anyone else who would be involved in the decision-making process? What's their role and what do they care about? So because there's so many more buyers involved today than there were a few years ago when cold calling worked, for example, and kind of the dial for dollars strategy worked. In this case, what you're doing is actually mapping who else would be involved and what they're going to care about. So, you know, when you get them back on the call, you could actually have how to structure that conversation and key people to actually be touching on or pulling their attention during that conversation, so that if someone checks out, you can pull them back in. Or if there's a key point that's actually really relevant to someone else, you can pull them back. You can speak to them specifically. And then needs you already established earlier in the conversation. And then timeline. Again, have you ever purchased a tool like this before? What was that process like? Because you're trying to map that buying process with that particular buyer. So you know from an expectations perspective, if this is a need for the organization, what's that process going to be like? Should I be setting it 3 months from now or 6 months from now? Did they need a POC? Did they not? Do they have a legal process? Is there InfoSec review? All those things are critical elements as you start to design your forecasts. And Jake mentioned a lot, VCs care a lot about revenue and forecasting. And so the more accurate you can be in forecasting, this is a key piece that's going to help you do that. And then the other key tip on this is, after you fully understand what's going to happen after you get off the conversation, like, do you need an NDA signed prior to the stakeholder meeting? Do you need to get some data to actually craft a more solid ROI story? Are you sending something over to them afterwards? Once you fully understand what that process is going to look like, repeat it back to the person. It comes from nonviolent communication, but it shows that you're listening and that you've paid attention to the buyer. So what I'm understanding is, after this, we're going to set up a stakeholder meeting. We need to get an NDA signed. So I'll send you a follow-up email asking for that. And then from there, in the stakeholder meeting, these are the people that are going to be involved. This is what they're going to care about. And this is how, and then from there, your average process typically takes about 3 months to get legal, security review, et cetera. Is that correct? Great. Okay. What I would ask is, can we make sure that InfoSec and legal potentially are on the call, especially if you deal with PII? Getting the security people on the demo conversation is really important, because the security review is going to be sped up quite a bit. The other thing is, if you're dealing with PII, getting a 10-minute conversation with legal, again, can speed up that sales cycle. So on Jake's point around optimization, those are some key ways that you can do it and do it much faster, though it's a little bit harder to do. And then finally, next steps. So what's going to happen when you get off the call? What's your homework? What's their homework? And then I always like to schedule my next step if I can. Even if they say circle back with me in 2 weeks, great. Is this typically a good time of day for you? Fantastic. What I'm going to do is send over a calendar invite for this time, and I'll check in with you a couple days beforehand. If we need to move it, no worries. I'll send that over.
When you talk about use cases or case studies, if it's a really early stage company that, can you make them up and what you think it could be? Because they might not have clients. So what would you insert there or suggest putting in that process?
Your founder story should be your first case study that you're giving. And then if you can't give a case study, ideally you've done some customer discovery to do for your beta users to develop this product. So you may have pieces of a case study. So for example, you may have talked to someone where this is how it worked for them. You can talk about, when we talked to XYZ, one of the issues they had was this is how the product would work for them. And they're not a customer yet, but we've been in conversation with them. So you're always being honest, because again, it's about building a foundation of trust with the buyer. And if they know that person, they're going to go ask and back channel around it. So you don't necessarily want to make it up. You want to make sure that it's a valid use case when you give it. And beta customers are a great way to do that.
Awesome. Have you guys thought of or considered any ways to actually track through LinkedIn interactions? Any tools or anything that you've seen? Like you said, a lot of our sales tools are give us heavy insights. Anything that could help in that area?
Yeah, there's a few. So one, what we use from a content standpoint is an app. We white label it. It's called Shield. But basically what Shield will let us do is track content performance, follower count, companies that are viewing, basically all your post data in one aggregated place, which actually is like a very rich data set that you can export. We actually did an analysis of 1,600 plus posts that we're going to be dropping an ebook on. What was it? I think yesterday. Or we're not going to drop it yesterday. We're going to drop it in like 2 weeks. So I'm reading Eva Cortez here. It says yesterday, and my brain just like went into like yesterday. So the answer is no. The best data that you can get is just more around performance versus, you can't really track. There's no way to track how many times someone else commented on something. You can track total interactions on your own stuff, but not external.
Awesome. I got a couple more questions, but a little bit of a summary for everyone. I mean, for what you guys heard today, it's fantastic. A lot of people will focus on one of these things or the other. So I just got to get to connect. I got to get that meeting. I got to get that meeting. And they go into the sales meeting and they have no clue what they're doing, or they burn the lead that came through. So the fact that we've kind of gone over one tactic and kind of a new modern tactic on how to get to a connect and get someone to take that call, and then actually utilize that call to the best of its ability. I think people hopefully have got tons of value on this so far. Jake, a little bit more on the LinkedIn side. Any sort of types of, like you're saying, don't connect with somebody, interact with them through their posts and your posts and them responding. Is that the suggestion?
No, connect with them first. No, because you want to be able to DM them versus IM them, email them. Like what I would suggest, Mike asked, like, no, do not send a note with your connection request unless it's like a super high level person. It's a waste of time. Like the worst thing is the copy and paste. Like, and we've studied like the difference between no message, copy and paste message that talks about synergies and how we're in the same business, and then super customized. Super customized actually shockingly does better. But I can connect with 82 people in 12 minutes via Sales Navigator. It'd take me or I can write 4 customized messages. My network size of relevant people in a month is going to be 50x yours. So save the custom stuff for people that you're like, I have to get this person to connect with me.
Excellent. Whitney, when it comes to the whole process you're going through, is it the similar process for the second call? Like you're usually not going to do this one call and close a client, or is the idea to understand what their process is, so you have the first process in the call and then you kind of work into their process?
Yeah. So so every time a new buyer is added to the conversation, you do need to go back and requalify that buyer, because each person within the organization has different priorities and needs. So I might interpret my boss's priorities as one way, but then when I actually talk to that person, like when the salesperson actually talks to that person, it's totally different. And so you do need to qualify each person. And that's why you want to have a stakeholder meeting with everyone who's involved in the decision-making process, ideally as fast as possible, if you can, if there are multiple buyers that you need to get buy-in from. And they could be, influencers, they could even be blockers, but still need to get them aligned around the value of the product. And so each time there's a new person added, you do need to go back and requalify. So the qualifying piece is still important, so that you can build that alignment with more buyers. And then your use case may change once you understand what the actual needs and the aligned needs of the organization are. You're just getting one person's buy-in for the qualifying to basically get the rest of the people involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You get new people in this process and you skip that because you're like, oh, I've already pitched them on that. And then the deal doesn't happen and you go back, and 9 times out of 10, it always leads back to that spot where you didn't kind of align everyone on the way through.
I need some traction.